American Family News, I'm Steve Pugh. Democrats will respond to President Trump's primetime address tonight as the standoff continues over border wall funding. Rachel Sutherland reports.
Some Democrats are threatening to take the president to court if he tries to use a national emergency as a way to go around Congress to get wall funding. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia breaking with fellow Democrats, telling Fox News,
if the president declares an emergency, he has a right to do that. And it'll probably go to the courts and be contested. If that gets us out of a shutdown, then so be it. I want to get out of this shutdown.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer will give a rebuttal to President Trump's Oval Office address. In a joint statement, they called on the president to reopen the government while Congress debates the wall. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
More than 250 prescription drug prices increased at the start of 2019, despite pressure from the Trump administration and plans aimed to lower costs for Americans. Today on America's Newsroom, Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar said while news of the increase is not the best, President Trump will continue working to lower costs and has already made significant changes.
He's ending foreign free riding off of American investment in R&D. That's $17.5 billion in savings from the first 5 years of that program that we'll be doing. He's freed up pharmacists to tell patients about lower cost alternatives for their drugs and brought new negotiating tools to Medicare programs. So across the board, historic action to blow up the status quo here.
A federal court rejected President Trump's first attempt at lowering rates, saying the Trump administration overstepped its legal authority when reducing payments for prescription drugs for Medicare recipients at hospitals. Investigators in California say they've got their suspect in a string of shootings that left one young father dead.
35-year-old Irvine scientist Tristan Beaudet was shot to death last June as he and his daughters slept in a tent.
They understand that Daddy didn't wake up, and there was a lot of blood when they woke up with the loud noise.
Family members relieved about charges now against Anthony Rauda, a 42-year-old parolee who lived in the Malibu State Park Wilderness area and who was arrested last October, who police say is also accused of 10 counts of attempted murder on other campers and motorists in the area and burglary. Rauda's bail is set at $1.1 million. He's back in court later this month. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
A Florida university that unfairly distributes money to conservative student organizations now finds itself facing a lawsuit that was filed late last month. Bob Kellogg has the story.
The University of Florida has the right to collect mandatory fees from students to help fund organization speakers and events. But Alliance Defending Freedom attorney Tyson Langhofer says the school is failing to distribute the funds in a fair and viewpoint-neutral manner to the Young Americans for Freedom Club.
All they want is equal access so they can use those funds to bring in a different viewpoint. And that's what the First Amendment requires.
The student government has a free rein to distribute the money as they see fit. But Langhofer says they apparently are singling out and disqualifying conservative groups from receiving the funds.
And that's all we really want, is to make sure that they are administering this student activity fee policy in a constitutional manner and that all student groups are treated the same.
Langhofer says they are prepared to litigate if the university does not see to it that Young Americans for Freedom and all groups are treated equally. I'm Bob Kellogg.
Finally, we could find out today if Sears will survive.
There's a hearing in bankruptcy court to decide whether American icon Sears will begin the process of shutting down. The parent company of former retailing giants, the Sears and Kmart chains, missing a key deadline Friday to report whether it would accept a $4.4 billion rescue deal cobbled together by Chairman Eddie Lampert through his hedge fund. It was aimed at trying to keep 425 stores open and save 50,000 jobs. Unsecured creditors push for liquidation, arguing they wouldn't recover enough under Lampert's offer. Sears' last profitable year was 2010. It's lost $12 billion since then. Lillian Wu, Fox News.
For American Family News, I'm Steve Pugh.
Before I came to Teen Challenge, I felt that I was in a dark pit, so I just kept drinking. Jesus Christ was that spark of hope. This is where my addiction stops, and this is where healing starts for me. If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction, Adult and Teen Challenge can help. There are centers across the country, and you can find the one nearest you at 855-END-ADDICTION or at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We just need to call it for what it is. And the Dems are looking at this as a political fight. They're trying to win the shutdown fight politically, and they're not really getting at what's the best for America's national security. And if they did, talking about what's moral, what's just, what's most consistent with the oath that they take, is that they would be negotiating and compromising in good faith.
He needs to keep articulating it, make the case to the public this evening, and we need to get something done on the border. $25 billion was what most Democrats agreed to very recently, and we're asking for a little over $5 billion.
I hope that the president will take a different path. That remains to be seen, but he can expect a strong and swift challenge from all of us and other members of Congress and from the American people.
We said, fine, no wall, fence, steel slab, whatever. If we all agree we have to secure the border and we funded it in the past, let's fund it again and move forward.
And now, Stacey Washington.
Welcome to the show. I'm still in the state of shock that the president is going to give an address this evening and the Democrats are going to actually rebut it. Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. You know, I understand the Democrats have something they want, and that is open borders and lawlessness. I just don't understand how they don't think that it's ever going to come back and bite them, that they're not eventually going to have their repercussions run up behind them and overtake them. Evil will chase you down, and it bites its own. So it's interesting to see them advocating for things that will leave the people they claim to represent in dangerous, precarious positions. Today on the program, we have fantastic guests for you. We're going to speak to Quinn Hillyer, senior commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. He'll be up in the next segment. We're also going to hear some audio from the vice president. We're going to be talking about preborn. Again, today, we are so excited about partnering with preborn. Please give a call to 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396. And what you'll find there is a person who's going to help you through the process of donating to preborn so that we can get ultrasounds for free to women who are abortion-minded. And this ultrasound allows the mom to not only hear the baby's heartbeat, but to see the precious life there inside her, the baby that's growing, not a lump of cells, not something that needs to be evacuated, but a baby. And this is free of charge to her. 100% of your donation goes to preborn. And we're looking for $28, or for those who have more that they're willing to go with us and partner with us, $140, which provides 5 free ultrasounds. So $28 for 1 or $140 for 5. And we're so excited about this opportunity. We have a chance to save up to 2,000 babies. We're about 20% there, and we need you to get over the hump. So please call in to 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396, or hit afr.net. That's my favorite way to give. Just click through and you'll be done in moments. And then you can check that off your list and go on about your day. So thank you for being here today. In addition to that, we're going to hit some topics. I have some. So there is no bad Ann Coulter audio, I think. Even when she says stuff I disagree with, she's got, the facts and everything to back up her position. And she talks about how the president has to declare the wall a compassionate solution. We're going to hear that in the third segment. We'll take your calls then as well. And I found a piece by, I think it's John Nolte, where he talks about the 7 things that should make the Oval Office address, 7 points that should be in the address. I'm concerned that, how the Bible says you toss your pearls before swine, and, it's basically, it's a waste. It's a symbolic way of talking about waste. There's also the seed that gets tossed into the hard ground, and the wind blows it away and the sun withers it down, and so it doesn't take root. And my concern has been that there's too many people in America, after a steady diet of CNN, who are unable to hear the truth. So no matter what the president says, they're unable to hear it. They're only going to wait for the Democrats' rebuttal. But it occurs to me that if we look at the polls over the years, over and over and over again, Americans have just been clear. It's always an overwhelming majority of people who want to see common sense immigration proposals. Now, people differ on how to get it done, but when they're asked by a solid pollster that doesn't have an agenda what they think about legal and illegal immigration, Americans are always the same. And Black Americans have been drug along and used as a cudgel to try to beat down any well thought out, honest opposition to open borders. Blacks are always said, well, we need to, as Black people, we need to be in line with other minorities and especially illegals, as if there's something illegal about being born with a permanent tan. There isn't. God doesn't make any mistakes when it comes to his creation. So there's no, well, the Black people have to side with the illegals. There's nothing inherently wrong with being Black. And the fact that so many millions of Blacks in America have bought into this is purely a function of people not being wise enough to understand when they're being duped. And wisdom comes from the fear of the Lord. And if people are just watching CNN and never cracking open their Bibles, because I know it's really in vogue now to say which megachurch you go to and who your pastor is, and therefore just by sitting in the pews under him, you're supposed to be wise and definitely an extra super special Christian. When the reality is we're all sinners saved by grace, the sum of us, and ones that are actually in their word, cracking it open, not just reading one little scripture here or there, but daily delving into God's word, seeking and combing the scriptures for the wisdom that comes from there, praying to God, repenting for sins, and repeating that process again and again and again so that we can be sanctified and transformed into his image. Unless that's going on, then you are susceptible to having the truth stolen away from you before you can get it and only being fed a steady stream of lies. And so we know that that's what's going to happen tonight. I just popped over to Mediaite earlier this morning. I was getting ready for the show, going about doing some things, and I said, I haven't been to Mediaite in a couple of weeks. Every story over there, save one, is about how the president is lying about the border, how no terrorists have been apprehended, and how, all of the Trump administration is just full to the brim with people who want to have lies about the illegal immigrants so that they can't come in here when they really deserve to be here because they're just people seeking a better life. None of the issues and concerns that most of us are really upset about, the fact that there's disease coming into the country that we've previously eradicated and are no longer being vaccinated for, that there are strange diseases now popping up in our country that have never been seen here before. We don't have vaccinations for them because they're not indigenous to our population group or our land. We don't have a way of knowing what we're dealing with unless we just go through the trial and error. We also have 10% of all of our drunk driving deaths due to illegals. We have a huge portion of our prison population are illegal immigrants. We're paying to feed them and house them and buff them up on, weights, lifting weights in their workout programs. We're paying for them to get their GEDs and some of them, bachelor's degrees in prison. And this low-wage workforce is undercutting those who really need a leg up in this country. Remember, the president proposed that we take the money that we're currently spending on programs to help illegal immigrants become legal and pour that money back into inner city schools to give inner city kids a leg up out of these poverty-ridden situations. Because inner city Black Americans are American citizens, and they deserve any money that's going to be given out in programs should go to individuals in this country who are at the bottom of the rung. Or we should reduce the tax burden and give that money back to the people who are working for the money. But there's no place in that scenario where we should say, let's allocate more money to helping people who've initially broken the United States immigration law by coming here illegally to help them stay here. Another interesting fact before I get to our daily confession today that I got to get out there is that if you hearken back to Reagan's amnesty, just cast your mind back. And if you're young and you're listening to the show, God bless you. I love that youthful thing you've got going on. But you can still learn about this too. If you're older, you remember. If you were any form of young adult on up, it was the biggest deal anywhere in America that President Reagan gave the Democrats some amnesty for what was supposed to be around 3 million illegal aliens, which at the time was a huge number. Those illegal aliens were given amnesty, and then through chain migration, another 9 million of their family members received amnesty. In addition to that, people who came to this country illegally after that decision was made applied to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals because they said they didn't have a chance to apply for amnesty when it was given out because they weren't in the country illegally at that time. So they've come late and they still want their opportunity. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals granted those individuals amnesty as well. We don't actually have a concrete figure that we can get from the government on how many people were able to, through that Ronald Reagan amnesty, become American citizens. But I can tell you, it's a draw for everyone else. And it's the reason why it keeps getting stuck in my craw. You've heard me say on the show, I'm going to own up to it. You've heard me say on the show over and over again that I don't want any amnesty, but I'd be willing to, as the president said, do the DACA, give the DACA recipients something lawful so that they can get off our backs so we can move past this and end chain migration and have the wall. Well, here's the problem. The problem is that any amnesty that you give, you can't actually put a quantifiable stop on it because the courts will give more. If you set the precedent that you're giving some amnesty to this group, you don't really have a good reason not to give it to other people who come afterwards who say they're in the same boat. They just weren't here in time originally. This is wrong. And it hurts America. It hurts Americans, and it hurts our wallets. It's hurting the hearts of Americans who've lost their children, their wives, their husbands, their sons. Every week, we have one or two news stories of illegal aliens killing people. So also, while we're here on the show today, and I've got so much for you, we're also going to talk about Chuck Norris's article about the incredible solution to building the border wall. And it's the El Chapo Act, and that was introduced by Senator Ted Cruz, a man of brilliance who we are blessed to have in our country and we should hear more from. And then I'm hoping we can get to it. Email providers suppressing Republicans in the 2018 election. This is a huge story. I don't want it to get lost, and I might save it over for tomorrow or the next day because I know the big story today is immigration and the president's address, and we're going to hit that as well. So right now, I want to go to, it's Psalm 37. Now, look, y'all, I'm in the Psalms, obviously, because I'm in BSF, and I've been getting a lot from it, a lot. I mean, I've been blessed greatly through the connections that the BSF leaders are putting. They're connecting up the story of David, obviously, to the Psalms that he wrote and the way that he viewed problems in comparison to the way that we view them. And you and I know, I mean, you're here with me, you're alive, you're walking, you're warm-blooded, you're an American, you probably see problems and you think, you kind of compartmentalize them and say, okay, if I do this, this, and this, I can tackle this problem. And David just wasn't that guy. Any problem he had, no matter what it was, he took it to God. He also was diligent about asking God, what should I do? Do I go this way or do I go that way? Should I go down? Should I stay here? And God always answered him. Now, this in our 24-hour-a-day news cycle, screens everywhere, all the things that impact us, and we feel like we can't hear from God. We can. That is what the Psalms tell us, because God is not different now than he was back then when he used to tell David exactly the answers to all of his problems. And the other thing that I want to point out before I share some of this Psalm with you is that, again, I want to reiterate, because this is something that I'm getting from this that I think is so valuable for us, and that is, even when you're in the right and you've been behaving uprightly, you have put your best foot forward, you have served, this could be a work situation, it could be a marital situation, relationships, anything. In any case, you as a person can be in the right and completely right in a situation and still be mistreated, maligned, slandered, and in David's case, hunted like a beast. He was literally hunted for years and years and years by Saul. He was the preordained successor to the king, and he was upright and right before God, absolutely without fault in his dealings with Saul, and Saul still persecuted him. The reason I'm pointing that out is because we often think, well, I've dotted every I, I've crossed every T, I've prayed, I'm in Bible study, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. Why is this happening to me? I don't know the answer to why, except to say that in all of these situations, we are to rely on God. So this is what I want to give to you today. This is a fantastic Psalm. It's Psalm 37. Please read it today at some point, maybe after dinner or before bed or whenever you have a chance to whip it out. Use your phone. If you don't have the YouVersion Bible app, you got to get that thing. Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong, for like the grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Read that today and be encouraged. We'll be right back with Quinn Hillyer after this.
I told him that, and he was just like, well, you gonna have an abortion? I was like, okay, yeah. I don't want kids either. And so Miss Jackie was like, well, would you like an ultrasound? And I was like, sure, whatever. And so she turned on the sound, and my baby had a heartbeat. We don't talk anymore. I lost my best friend. But I gained a new best friend, so I'm totally okay with that.
The Ministry of Preborn supports young moms in crisis with love and support and free ultrasounds, because when a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to choose life for her baby. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. To donate, dial 877-616-2396 or visit afr.net.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with A Legacy Moment. I love the story of Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker was a preacher in 19th century England. When he first arrived in London, he was a little bit intimidated because he was a contemporary of the great British preacher Charles Haddon Spurgeon. He arranged a meeting with Spurgeon and showed up at his office. Young Parker said to Spurgeon, the great orator, "I'm not an educated man." Well, as the story goes, Spurgeon stopped him and said, "Look, God has many ways of preparing his servants." The rest is history. Out of that meeting, Parker left with great encouragement, and he went on to become, in his own right, one of the greatest preachers of the 19th century. See, God puts a premium on availability. He loves taking people with open, teachable hearts and pouring into them exactly what they need to know and the experiences they need in order to accomplish what he places before them. Listen to these words in Acts chapter 4, verse 13. Now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated, common men, they were astonished, and they recognized that they had been with Jesus. Notice, they were astonished. But what made them marvel like that? Despite the fact that they were untrained and uneducated, they said that they had been with Jesus. I want to balance this by saying God does want us to develop our minds, and if he opens doors for education, we need to pursue it. But formal education is not God. Here's what I want you to remember today. Take courage. God will give you everything you need in order to do what he's called you to do. The question is, like Peter and John, and like Joseph Parker, are you willing to make yourself totally and completely available to him?
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Thank you for being here today, and thank you for partnering with us on Mission Preborn. If you need that number again, first afr.net. So easy for you to get there. On your smartphone, a few clicks and you're done. $28 gets one ultrasound to a mom who is abortion-minded and helps her to hear the gospel. But you can also just go to your phone. You type it into your phone, 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396, and then you get to talk to one of our fantastic volunteers, and they'll help you through the process. So partner with us. It's Mission Preborn Week, and we're excited about doing this. So right now it's my pleasure to welcome senior commentary writer at the Washington Examiner. It's Quinn Hillyer. Quinn, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on, Stacey.
Hey, you know what? I'm excited to talk to you. You and I have, we often just communicate online, or I read your thoughts and comments online. And so this is important because you've written a piece about the worst American politics since the Civil War. And I couldn't agree with you more, but I'm wondering, what do we do? Like, what do we do to fix a situation like that?
Well, I'm actually about to start a column to try to start answering that question, but there is no short version as to how to fix it, other than for everybody to behave better and more like adults, which of course is a lot easier said than done. But sitting with and talking with and listening to each other and just making collective or a whole bunch of individual decisions, but doing it sort of collectively, that they are going to first think of legislating for the general good of the country rather than for political effect. And again, that's a bunch of platitudes, but it's more than platitudes. It's actually attitude, not just platitudes, and it requires hard work and action. And I don't want to filibuster, so I'll stop there.
Okay.
But that's the start.
Well, so I agree with you on the hard work and action. This is not easy because I liken it to, being in some kind of social group, whether it's a book club or, a club for maybe you like fixing cars, whatever. And you have somebody in that group that, for whatever reason, it's body chemistry, it's whatever, you and that person don't get along. And over time, that not being able to get along can fester into full-blown hatred that can mean that one of the two parties needs to leave the group, or it can ruin the dynamics for everyone else. And the kind of relationship that I'm discussing here is President Trump. He's been elected to the presidency. A lot of people are unhappy about it, but a lot of us were unhappy when Obama was elected. We know how this feels. But the difference is we've gone from we're going to negotiate on let's say wall funding, right, Quinn? Let's negotiate on wall funding. The Democrats are now saying, no, you can't have $1 for your wall. So it's not about a wall that they've voted to fund many, many times. It's about Donald Trump and vanquishing him, beating him, holding him at bay until they can impeach him and get him out of office. This is a different, we've moved past normal political rancor into a new era, it feels like.
Well, we definitely have, although, frankly, between when I left Capitol Hill at the end of 1996 and when I got back to Washington for a few years in 2006, just in those 10 years, we'd already gone a long way from where we had been to where we are now. When I got back up there, I was amazed. I talked to top staffers, or I would talk to congressmen, and trying to ask what was going on with particular issues, and they'd start to give me an answer, and then I would say, it was usually Republicans I was talking to, and I would say, okay, well, what do the Democrats say about this? Can you get any Democratic votes? And they'd look at me like I was crazy, like, huh? What? You talk to the Democrats? And I'd say, yeah, if you don't have enough votes of your own, you need to go get their votes. And just the thought was dismissed out of hand as if it was ludicrous. Well, it's not ludicrous, or it should not be ludicrous, to say that even though somebody is of a different party, they might come your way on particular issues. But you don't know it unless you're in constant dialogue with them. And again, I could give examples, plenty of examples from years past when it happened. It's not happening anymore.
Well, just the phrase that I often use, I've said over and over again that in the Senate, the Republicans need to go over and arm wrestle and twist arms and, deal and wheel and deal or whatever they need to do to get 10 Democrats to cross over to, make it possible for them to fund the wall. That's something that used to happen. Apparently, it is no longer something that can happen in this day and age. Like in 2019, you can't get 10 Democrats to come over. Although we seem to have a problem with our people defecting over to them for certain things. They don't have any that will come over to us.
Well, exactly. And part of it is the power of outside groups, and, there are all sorts of causes. There's racially gerrymandered, not racially, there's ideologically gerrymandered districts which are made, more and more safe seats than they were before, all sorts of causes. But the result is exactly what you described. Let me give you an example, though, of how it should work.
Okay.
My former boss was Bob Livingston, who almost became Speaker of the House, but that's another story. He was a very strong, solid conservative. He served on the Appropriations Committee for years with a very liberal Democrat from Wisconsin named Dave Obey. When they were young congressmen, they were so diametrically opposed on issues, and they were both so firm in it that they couldn't stand each other, and one time they literally almost came to blows. But they served together on that committee for 15 years. And they started to realize that even though they disagreed with each other, both of them would deal straight with each other. Both of them would let everybody know why they stood where they stood and what might be negotiable, et cetera, so that they developed a sort of a grudging friendship. So that when Obie became chairman of the powerful Appropriations Committee, only to 1 year later have the Democrats lose the majority and Livingston take over as the chairman, it was not a contentious thing. Obie left a little gift and a nice note in the chairman's desk when Bob came in, and even though they were on diametrically opposite sides in the next couple of years when Livingston was chairman, they would laugh together and work together, at least to keep things running smoothly, even when they were fighting over policy. That's how it should be, but you don't see that anymore, and it's really frustrating.
It is. And you know what, Quinn, your description of those two gents reminds me of when I was on school board. Now, obviously, totally, different arena, but I was elected. All of us were elected onto school board. And going in, a lot of us already knew the politics of the other members. So it wasn't like we went in and thought, I have no idea what these people feel politically. We knew, where people stood. But there were a lot of issues on which someone could say, make a phone call and say, can we have coffee, or can you have 30 minutes to talk to me on the phone? I got to lay some stuff out to you. And one-on-one, as people who both paid taxes in that district and maybe had children there, or your children just graduated, whatever, you're invested. We could talk about things and come to a place where that person would say, you know what, I'll vote with you on this. I'm not as diametrically opposed to it as I may have appeared originally now that I've talked to you. The understanding being that if they had something they really cared passionately about, they would come and explain it to me, and I would give it, serious consideration. So not a blanket, yes, I'll vote whatever you want one time, but you can come to me, we're on a working relationship. That happened a lot on school board, where we would argue on one issue and be beating our hands on the table and, almost yelling, and then vote. And then the next issue come up and we'd all be like lambs voting together, or, yes or no. And that happened all the time. How do we get back to that kind of understanding between people, that we're all living here together? We can't be enemies, full-blown enemies, if we're all still Americans. How can we get back there?
Everything you said is exactly right, and that's how Congress used to operate, too. And look, I'm not some sort of middle-of-the-road squish. I'm a solid conservative. This is not a call to say, oh, conservatives should go and kowtow to liberals and always be the one to give up our principles or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you talk to each other and respect each other and listen to each other and negotiate with each other, you can end up finding common ground where you didn't know it existed. You can decide that one issue you might give a little more on because it's not all that important to you, even though you totally disagree, but know that on another issue that it might be more important to you than to them, and they will in turn give a little more. That you have that mutual respect and sort of it's an unstated balance where, okay, I went with you last time, you might go with me next time, and I'll trust that this sort of unstated debit and credit system will work. That's called acting like an adult. That's called working through problems, and it's not just political. That's how most of us live our lives outside of politics. So why can't they do that on Capitol Hill?
Well, you mentioned just a bit ago that there are these outside influences, and I remember. Let's see. So this is a vague memory, but it's definitely real because I remember MoveOn getting very upset, MoveOn.org getting very upset with some legislator who was a Democrat who crossed over the aisle and voted with the Republicans. And they, if I'm not mistaken, the online hatred was so vitriolic that that person, either they didn't end up running again or that someone else ran and beat them. But it was basically the end of what they were doing as a Democrat, because MoveOn basically said, we don't have any room for traitors. I've also seen online where regular people, some with blue check marks, have said as much. You better not even think about going over there and voting with Republicans because they're wrong. They hate America. They're trying to destroy this country. And so you can't ever have anything in common with them. You can't ever work with them. That's the rhetoric coming from the left. On the right, we do have people who are willing to move over. They're often called squishes. I'm just like you. I'm as hardcore on the right as I can possibly get. I understand why Lindsey Graham wants to make friends and try to work across the aisle. I feel like he's done it in ways that have hurt the party objectives, but I do get it. But they don't have anybody on their side like that because MoveOn.org and other groups like that won't let it happen.
You're right, except that I do think that the groups on the right that do the same thing. Look, I am convinced that we would have had a full repeal and replacement of Obamacare in 2017 if, for instance, Heritage Action had not gone so firm with its Freedom Caucus members in the House demanding an absolutely pure Obamacare repeal bill. And so what happened is conservatives lost the momentum there. The first time it came up, they couldn't get the vote, so they pulled it from the calendar back when Trump was still in his so-called honeymoon period. And by the time conservatives and Republicans regrouped and finally passed it in the House, they had lost all momentum, and the lay of the land had changed, and there was really very little chance of getting something through the Senate. Now, they almost got sort of a fake bill through the Senate, and John McCain killed it because it was fake. But they would have had a lot easier time in the Senate if Heritage Action had not insisted that the original bill be absolutely pure. But they put the fear of God into a lot of Republicans saying, if you vote for this 90% pure bill, you're never going to get elected as a Republican again. Well, that meant that nothing got done, and so we still haven't repealed or replaced Obamacare.
And the chance of doing it now is pretty slim.
Despite your face, and both sides do it.
No, you're right. That's a perfect example that's recent that still burns, because I know it comes up sometimes, Quinn, when I'm with my politically minded friends and we're sitting around talking, and someone will say, yeah, remember when we were going to repeal and replace Obamacare? They said they were going to do that too. It also adds some pessimism to voters where a lot of people don't think the wall can get done because Obamacare couldn't get done. And that was when Republicans had, quote unquote, control. So we're at the end of the segment here, and I'm going to put the link to your piece up. I know you're not advocating for squishiness, but for some semblance to a return to the adults running the show. I'm just feeling pretty pessimistic that that's not going to happen, because right now the Democrats want to, and they're obsessed with the removal of President Donald Trump. It's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. But because that is their primary thing that they get up and pour their coffee for every day, it's the reason why they're doing everything, it means nothing else can get done. And that's a real shame.
Let me jump in here and just say, I've also got another column that said the Democrats are the ones being cynical on the wall. And just to show that I definitely agree with you, right now the left is really quite guilty of this, and the wall is the perfect example. Please read that column as well, because they really are the ones that are being recalcitrant here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the columns and for the work that you're doing. I love reading your stuff. It's excellent. And thank you for your time today. First time we're speaking in the new year. Happy New Year to you. Thanks, Quinn.
Happy New Year, Stacey. Thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you again soon. Quinn Hillyer, senior commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. I will put both columns that he mentioned up when we go to the next break here, which we'll get into in just a second. I want to, if you're just tuning into the show, we are still doing our preborn. It's a week of partnership that we're doing here at American Family Association, American Family Radio, and Urban Family Talk. And I just want to point out to you that this is one of the reasons why we exist, to point people to the gospel and to partner with ministries like Preborn so that we can save lives. We're literally in the ministry field, in the workplace, doing what we can do to show ourselves approved before the coming of our Lord. So I want you to partner with us. It's 877-616-2396. 877-616-2396.
Can solid teamwork building principles apply to all of life? Here's Tony Dungy, author of The Soul of a Team, with today's uncommon moment.
In my book, The Soul of a Team, SOUL is an acronym, and the S stands for selflessness, which is defined as putting individual needs aside for the good of the team. In 2007, just before my final season as a head coach, the Colts drafted Anthony Gonzalez, a wide receiver from Ohio State. Because he wouldn't complete his studies until June, Anthony was unable to make off-season practices and minicamp. Not wanting his new teammate to miss out, Peyton Manning drove 3 hours to Columbus, Ohio twice a week so he could spend an hour going over the playbook with Anthony and another hour and a half throwing to him. He sacrificed his own time because that's what the Colts needed to be successful.
Tony Dungy, best-selling author of The Soul of a Team, from Tyndale House. More at CoachDungy.com.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. While Democrats obstruct the president and advocate for illegals, the Department of Defense is redirecting discretionary spending to fund border wall completion. This is excellent news because of the urgent need to stop 55,000 illegal immigrants from entering America every month. The influx represents a radical change to the very composition of the country. Over a dozen states have huge percentages of non-English speaking residents living and working, replacing American citizens. The burden to taxpayers is daunting. Each illegal alien costs $70,000 per year. That number increases the longer the illegal lives in America. In addition to redirecting federal discretionary funds, the president should work with governors to implement a tax on remittances to Mexico. It has already worked in other states and could become a significant source of revenue to offset the costs of housing the enormous population of lawbreakers. If illegal aliens are here to stay, make them pay their own way. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Securing America.
President Trump's addressing the nation tonight about border security. Over the weekend, he said he might declare a national emergency. Democrats, like New York Congressman Jerry Nadler, says if he does that, he better not try to build a border wall.
We would certainly oppose any attempt by the president to make himself a king and a tyrant by saying that he can appropriate money without Congress.
He was among Democrats like Congresswoman Xochitl Torres-Small, who went to Alamogordo, New Mexico Monday to investigate the deaths of 2 Guatemalan children. They were in Customs and Border Protection custody.
We've seen some improvements, but we still need to have medical equipment in all of our facilities in the most rural reaches of the border.
Leon Wilmot is the sheriff in Yuma County, Arizona.
Congress needs to get politics out of public safety, period.
He said he's glad President Trump is headed to the Texas border Thursday to engage with the Border Patrol. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacey on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
What I expect the president will do tonight is explain to the American people that we have a humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border. 60,000 people are now attempting to come into our country illegally every month. That's more than 2,000 a day. But what's unique about it, Hallie, and why the Washington Post has even called it a bona fide emergency, is because the vast majority of those people now are families and unaccompanied children, and it simply is overwhelming the ability of our Customs and Border Patrol to address it. And so the president will take those facts to the American people. He'll talk about the 17,000 people with criminal records that we've apprehended at our border. He'll explain the need not just to build a wall, which he's determined to do, but also to provide our Border Patrol with additional resources, humanitarian and medical assistance, new technology. But the Democrats need to come to the table and start negotiating. But tonight, the president will take that case to the American people.
That's Vice President Pence speaking about what is going to happen tonight. And he did a couple of interviews. And, of course, the mainstream media types tried to grill him. And they've been making a big deal out of statements by Sarah Huckabee Sanders about different numbers of people who've been apprehended. And I have one thing to say when people say, well, they said they got like 41 suspected terrorists or 41 terrorists on watch lists. And another, but most of the other ones that they apprehended, they're on terror watch lists, but they're American citizens or they're citizens or they're green card holders or they're nationals or whatever. How many people did it take to pull off 9/11? How many people did it take to pull off 9/11? It was one guy over in the Middle East, and then 11 of them here in the United States. So don't, miss me with this idea that there just aren't, we got to keep the border open because we're only catching 41 terrorists. That's just not enough to justify building a wall. One terrorist crossing our border illegally is enough to justify building a wall, because one terrorist shot up the Pulse nightclub and killed 49 people and wounded scores of others. One deranged lunatic in Las Vegas shot up a whole bunch of people at a concert. It doesn't take but one crazy individual bent on evil to do harm. And if you say, well, we already have our own homegrown terrorists, and we have rapists, so why do we need to import more? Why allow more of them to pour in here? One terrorist is too many. One rapist is too many. One murderer is too many. So if we have even one in this country that are already American citizens, that means we're all full up. We don't need any more crazy here. Thanks, but keep it moving in another direction away from our border. It's so simple. We'll go to the phones, and then we will get back to, I have the 7 points that President Trump should make in his Oval Office address about the border. I've been saying he's going to address the nation from the border. He's actually going to address the nation from the Oval Office and then head to the border on Thursday. Randy, thanks for calling the show today.
Hello.
Hello. How's it going?
Hello. Hey, pretty good. First, I have to apologize for a comment I made a couple of weeks ago. My wife got on me for using the term looky here, and she has been on me ever since.
Well,
So,
I mean, it's not like people in my family don't say that, and I may have been known to say that every now and again. It raises eyebrows around here because I'm such a Nazi about the grammar, but
okay,
yeah,
well,
you're good.
Anyway, she jumped on me about that one. But anyway, I think Trump's really an independent, and I think he ought to just stick to his guns. And all these people that are coming across the border, they have a lot of health issues besides mental health. And these people are sick, and if they bring whatever they have to this country, we're going to be sick.
Because we're not prepared. We're not vaccinated for what they have. We don't even know what they've got.
Exactly. And third, I tried to call Comrade Pelosi's office and Comrade Schumer's office, but nobody wanted to give out a number. And
they didn't want to talk to you. They didn't want to talk to you.
And so I told, I said, I was going to tell, I don't know if Pelosi was at a resort or a psychiatric hospital over there in Hawaii, but she kind of needs help with both, and take a break and everything. Okay, well, that's all I got to say today. Thank you for not putting me on call block.
Oh, thanks, Randy. Thanks for calling in, and good to talk to you. Tell your wife I said hello. I want to point out that Nancy Pelosi chose to vacation in Hawaii, which is actually one of the most expensive places in America to vacation. Just to show you where her mind is. She didn't take the poor man's route or the working man's route, or she didn't say, let me go someplace, in the heartland and so I can bump into some regular Americans. She was just like, I'm going to Hawaii because I can, because I'm rich. I'm worth, millions, tens of millions of dollars. And so I'm going to head on out and do some things that I want to do. And beans on you regular Americans with your crumbs from your tax cut that you're so excited about. So let's do one more call. Mark in Ohio, thank you so much for calling the show today.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good.
This thing with Trump tonight, I think it's just another example of him. He has this really good way, a great way of drawing people out of themselves and showing who they really are. And he'll do that tonight if people bother to watch the rebuttals. I'm not going to. But I think he's doing two things. He's going to make his case logically to the American people, and most Americans, whether they're on the right or the left, are going to say, yeah, we got to lock the door and, shut the door and lock it tight and bolt it, But then these Democrats coming on board afterwards, he's going to let them just be there. He lets them get worked up, and when he makes a decision, they're at the breaking point. And I don't think they're going to be able to resist making, fools out of themselves.
I agree.
The other thing, concerning Trump, I'm not saying I agree with everything he's done, but for decades, the Republican Party has just become so wimpy. And I think, we've wanted the Republicans to get back to their roots, to be constitutional. And, instead of an elephant, I really believe this, we've got a mastodon in the White House. I mean, I really believe that. And I really hope that, I'm glad Ryan's gone. He's a globalist.
Oh, I know.
Good riddance.
Yeah.
Hit the road. All you globalists, get lost. And I hope, the rest of these Republicans in there, and maybe even some Democrats, will wise up and say, doggone it, the country is dying. If we follow these stupid liberal, or the country will die if we follow these stupid liberal agendas. But people need to just wake up and forget the globalism. It's all it is global communism. George Orwell warned about it, and others. And Trump, I tell you what, I'm so impressed because his work ethic. I'm just a blue-collar worker. I clean homes and businesses for a living. And the first couple of months he was in office, I thought, I'm worried about the guy's health. But he's been doing it his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
He's a worker.
Yep, he's been eating
American.
Cheeseburgers, eschewing alcohol, and going to bed really late and waking up really early for his entire adult life. And I tell you what, that clean, kind of regular man living seems to be very agreeable to him. A lot of us with our kind of, Whole Foods shopping, wine swilling types, we could probably take a few lessons from him. I agree with you. He's strong. I feel like the burden to pray for him is really where a lot of us, we have to do that. We have to pray for him. And you know what, Mark? Tonight's the night. Tonight's the night he throws down a gauntlet. I believe the Supreme Court will uphold him building a wall on the southern border in the absence of approval from Congress if it's a national emergency, and I believe it is. 55,000 people entering illegally a month is a national emergency. But I don't think he's going to declare it tonight. I think he's going to talk about it and lay out the case, and then he will declare the national emergency from the southern border during his visit if the Democrats continue on, which I think they will. Thank you so much for calling. I love it when we get fantastic callers coming in. Thank you so much, everybody. 7 points Trump should make in his Oval Office address about the border. I'm sharing this with you because when I saw it this morning, I was like, yes, absolutely. So it's by Joel Pollack. I said it was by Nolte, but it's by Joel Pollack. The border issue is about national security. He says, number one, the first priority of government. Americans are used to fights over immigration policy, but this is different. The nation faces a crisis at the southern border, and the drug cartels are taking advantage. So the first point that he makes is there is literally no point to opening the government until politicians are prepared to take care of their first priority. Remember, we've talked about this on the show before. It's one of my running mantras. When people don't do their jobs, other people die. When Congress doesn't do their jobs, people die. Like the 2 Guatemalan kids that the Democrats care about. They don't care about your kids, but they care about the Guatemalan kids who died in custody. They died because the Democrats have not allowed us to build a wall and to close our southern border to illegal entry. That's a draw. It brings people here. It makes them drag their kids around across 1,400 miles of horrible terrain in 115-degree heat. The first victims of the Mexican cartels are the migrants and the countries from which they come. He describes how the cartels are brutal, slaughtering everyone, and pumping drugs into the United States. Literally enough cocaine. El Chapo, in 4 shipments, sent enough cocaine for every American, man, woman, and child to do a line of cocaine. Here in this country, he did that in 4 shipments. These drug cartels are killing Americans. It's a war they're waging on us. And we're arguing about $5 billion. The border crisis has nothing to do with legal immigration, which we embrace. He says Corporal Singh gave his life to defend the rule of law, to defend the rule of law, and that's what's at stake, and that's his point number 3. Point number 4, illegal immigration hurts all Americans, but especially legal immigrants, minorities, and the poor. We can have a generous welfare state or open borders, but not both. Point number 5, Democrats are hypocrites. Many Democrats, including Senate Schumer, I'm not even going to give him his whole title, Schumer, and others have voted for border barriers in the past. Walls, fences, drones, Border Patrol agents, none of that is immoral. Number 6, we have to act now because both parties, Republicans and Democrats, have failed in the past and they did nothing, and we can no longer wait. I go back to my previous point. When people don't do their job, people die. If a person is in charge of something of importance and they choose not to execute their duties as they are mandated to do, other people may die as a consequence of that dereliction, And those people who refuse to do their job should be held accountable up to the point of being responsible for those deaths. But since this is America and we're not doing that, we just get to talk about it. And number 7, his point that he feels President Trump should make tonight, the 7th point, is let the engineers design a barrier that works. The wall should not be a Democratic or Republican issue. It shouldn't be a budget issue. It should be an issue of what barrier works in what part of the southern border. There are over 2,300 miles of border down there, and every bit of it cannot be covered by a concrete structure. In places where a concrete structure that goes 5 feet below ground and 15 feet above it, in places where that would work, that's what we should have. In places where a smart barrier would work, that's metal and concrete, we should have that. In other areas where we just need patrols, human patrols, we should have that. We should have an increase in the number of judges. We should end chain migration. There are a lot of things we can do to stem the tide of illegal immigration into this country. But none of it can happen unless we have a president, commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, the person who is responsible for everything that goes on in this country that has anything to do with the government or the military. That person has to have enough steel in their spine to stand tall against this. It's basically obstruction from the Democrats. And if the president holds his ground, there are more than enough millions of us Americans out here who understand what he's doing and want common sense reforms at our southern border and to our entire immigration system, that he will be sailing into re-election in 2020. And so I always say, I know the president doesn't listen to this show, and I don't know what he listens to. I know he watches a lot of Fox, but I'll say this. This is the line in the sand that the president has to decide which side he wants to be on. He's already brought this issue to the forefront. We're all watching, and we want to be mobilized and ready to go for 2020 to support his re-election campaign. Forget about impeachment and the Russians. Forget about all of these other tertiary issues. We have to handle this border wall fight, and it has to be one that he wins. Tonight, I think, will be the opening salvo in that battle as he begins to paint a picture for the American people who have not yet heard him speak on the issue since he last was talking about the rapists and all of that. And I think if he comes out the same way he came out for Kavanaugh, when he was swearing in Kavanaugh, the presidential gravitas he presented there, it will be a wonderful thing for us because we'll get to see a lot of Americans hearing him for the first time in that way and understanding how serious this is, which is why I encourage you. We still have hours until our president approaches the podium to address the nation. And I encourage you to lift him up in prayer. If you have not yet done so, just take a moment and say a prayer for him that he would be at his best tonight and that the people who hear him, their eyes would be open and their ears would be attuned to listen for the truth, and that wisdom would prevail, and that justice would not just run out through this country, but that it would overtake the evildoers, and that they would get what is their just due. And I'm not talking about, when I say evildoers, this isn't a political thing. It's a rule of law thing. It's a right and wrong thing. It's a, hey, you're breaking the law thing, but you get away with it while that guy over there is going to the slammer. It's a equality under the law, that justice is blind. It's an American thing. It's a jurisprudence thing. It's an Anglo-Saxon type of, legal system type of a thing. It's everything that we've based all of our other laws and society, how we're going to deal with each other. We've based it all on that. Either our laws mean something or they mean nothing. We got to make a choice. So let's pray for the president. I hear the music. Good evening from the heartland for those of us who are leaving us right now. If you're sticking around, there's more Stacey on the right after onenewsnow.com news and information, which is up next. Keep it here.
American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net.
truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. President Trump will deliver a national address tonight about border security. Then it's the Democrats' turn. All of this, of course, comes as the government remains in a partial shutdown. Fox's Jared Halpern has more from Capitol Hill.
Hundreds of thousands of federal workers will see paychecks delayed beginning this week unless there's a quick fix to a partial government shutdown. Democratic lawmakers are highlighting TSA agents at busy airports like Illinois Senator Dick Durbin speaking at Chicago's O'Hare.
Why are we going through this conversation of picking and choosing these federal people who are serving our nation and simply want to come to work and get their weekly paycheck?
Vice President Pence and Homeland Security officials are briefing Republicans there at the Capitol, laying out the administration's case that there is a crisis at the southern border and a wall is desperately needed. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Meanwhile, National Security Advisor John Bolton is meeting with Turkish leadership to discuss the administration's plan to pull troops from Syria. Fox's Trey Yingst has more from Jerusalem.
Earlier in the week, while in Israel, Bolton laid out two key conditions for the U.S. withdrawal to occur. First, ISIS must be completely destroyed. Second, the Turkish government must ensure the safety of U.S.-backed Syrian Kurds. While Bolton held talks in Ankara, Turkey, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan refused to meet with him, instead speaking before Parliament, making clear that Turkey will not pledge to protect the Kurds, a group they view as terrorists. Meanwhile, President Trump's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo landed in Amman, Jordan, where he is also planning to discuss U.S. plans to leave Syria. Additionally, Pompeo will reportedly speak with leaders about ways the United States is looking to pressure Iran amid the country's expanding regional proxies.
Believers in Egypt are on high alert after a Coptic Christian lost his appeal to a blasphemy charge. Bill Bumpus has that story.
Just before Christmas, an appeals court in Upper Egypt upheld a 3-year prison sentence against Abd Adel Babawi. He was arrested last summer for making a Facebook post that was perceived to be an insult to Islam. The day after the arrest, there was a mob attack on the village. Claire Evans with International Christian Concern says this latest verdict has instilled fear among Christians in Egypt.
Because something as simple as a Facebook post would land him in jail for 3 years on blasphemy charges and create a mob attack. It's really concerning because nobody knows how safe they are.
Evans tells AFN Christians worry about collective punishment.
Unfortunately, it's quite common in Egypt. The community and collective punishment against Christians for the perceived wrong of one individual is commonplace, not just in this case, but in almost every incident we track. It's usually the community who is suffering because of a perceived wrong of one individual.
Evans says the ruling is also a huge setback for Babawi's family, as his wife and kids have been forced to move to another village. I'm Bill Bumpus.
Self-confessed Parkland school shooter Nicholas Cruz has appeared in court for a status hearing in the Florida school massacre that killed 17 people last year. Here's Fox's Jeff Manasso.
Nicholas Cruz said nothing and never looked up at the judge as he appeared briefly in Broward County Court for a procedural hearing, as a tentative trial date has not yet been set. The 20-year-old's attorney has said that Cruz will plead guilty in exchange for life in prison. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. Cruz is also charged with assaulting a corrections officer in the jail where he's being held without bond. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
And New York City is announcing that it will guarantee health care for all residents, regardless of immigration status or someone's ability to pay. The program, called NYC Care, is aimed at helping the estimated 600,000 people who live without health insurance in New York City. The program aims to provide health care services on a sliding scale based on people's ability to pay, and also connect them with a primary care doctor and provide access to specialty care, prescriptions, and more. The mayor says the city will pay for it through the public health care system and ultimately reduce the expenses of health care by having fewer people seek treatment at emergency rooms. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it It blesses me today, and you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers, weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We just need to call it for what it is. And the Dems are looking at this as a political fight. They're trying to win the shutdown fight politically, and they're not really getting at what's the best for America's national security. And if they did, talking about what's moral, what's just, what's most consistent with the oath that they take, is that they would be negotiating and compromising in good faith.
He needs to keep articulating it, make the case to the public this evening, and we need to get something done on the border. $25 billion was what most Democrats agreed to very recently, and we're asking for a little over $5 billion.
I hope that the president will take a different path. That remains to be seen, but he can expect a strong and swift challenge from all of us and other members of Congress and from the American people.
We said, fine, no wall, fence, steel slab, whatever. If we all agree we have to secure the border and we funded it in the past, let's fund it again and move forward.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right, Second Amendment Foundation Journalist of the Year for 2018, and I'm the co-chair of Project 21, which is a part of National Center for Public Policy Research, and we are really excited to be a part of their National Advisory Council. And we're excited to have you here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk, listening to the programming here. Welcome home. So I want to go to the phones, and then we'll be getting to hour two. We have a wonderful guest, Karen Straughan. She's been on the program before. She is a spokesperson for Men's Rights Edmonton and contributor to avoiceformen.com. And she's going to come on and talk to us about how the women's marches, you know, the women's marches, the ones that where everybody uses profanity and talks like a sailor, but they're still women. They've had them canceled all over the country because of racism and anti-Semitism. Apparently, too many white people are participating. Yeah, that's crazy town right there. It's the bullet train to crazy town, and anybody who believes that is not just on it. You're probably the train conductor. Anyway, let's go to the phones. Cherie in California. Thank you for calling the show today.
Hi, Stacy. I wanted to say thank you for taking my call and all the work that you do.
Thanks.
I'm here in California, and I just wanted to mention how liberals are very good at delivering emotional messages that appeal to people, and how maybe we need to start better being able to manage optics of what our message is. And I was thinking of something like a website that showed victims' families who have been taken by illegal aliens, kind of like the walkaway campaign, but with members going on there and giving their testimony from around the country.
It's a good idea. I think the reason, so there are natural gifts for each political party. Democrats, as you said, are very gifted at storytelling, but they also do the other kind of storytelling, which is lying. So they embellish a lot, and they ignore facts that don't support their policy aims, and they're really good at, you know, kind of saying, well, your data doesn't matter. That's what I faced most recently with liberals. When I talk about let's say the defensive gun use study that showed that guns were used millions and millions of times, they'll say, well, that study was debunked. Well, it wasn't. It was not debunked at all. It was supported by additional data and additional resources that were used to verify the study. But they'll just say, well, that was debunked, and then they filibuster. I know when you talk about websites, we've had guests on the program that have lost their children or their family members to illegal alien crime, and they have organizations with websites, and they go on television regularly to talk about their losses, but Democrats don't care. As good as they are at telling stories, they're also good at not caring about what has happened to other people unless you're in one of their favored groups. And so Republicans are great at charts and graphs and, making money. They're great at leaving people alone and allowing the free market to kind of, go where it will, and great at running suburban areas and places where, there's not a lot of poverty. And mainly that's because the policies that would lift other people out of poverty in inner cities, they don't want to hear anything from the Republicans. So each party has their own natural gifts. I think one of the things that I would just love the Republicans to do is just take off their sweater vests. And you don't have to have the same presentation as Donald Trump, but you could definitely be much stronger and not as, it's almost like Republicans have blinders on and they think, if I just don't say anything, the Democrats won't see me and then I won't have to deal with them. They can see you and they're going to run you over. So stop acting like not looking at them helps. You got to fight. I'm tired of sending people to Washington, D.C. that sound pretty ferocious behind the microphone, but when they get there, they're just like lambs. Like Susan Murkowski, that picture of her in that little recess on Capitol Hill. There's a recessed area of the wall, and she's standing in it, and she can't get out because Dianne Feinstein, who is not tall, has her arm reached up to the top of the opening and is basically holding her hostage in that little recess to make sure she doesn't vote with the Republicans on the Kavanaugh nomination. That's an image that's very telling. Democrats don't care if they're tall. They don't care if they're big. They don't care if they don't care. They're just meaner than you, and they want you to know it. Well, I used to have a saying that there's nobody meaner than me. That's what I used to say. Thankfully, the Lord has released me. But I used to say it because it was true. And so you don't have to be tall or short or fat or burly. You don't have to be muscular. It's really whether or not you believe you're the meanest. It's whether or not you believe that you can't be beat. And I'm not talking about like think it and therefore it is and all that stuff. I'm just talking about confidence in what you believe and where you're coming from, that you're not going to let someone else roll you over. You're not going to let it happen because you know you're right. We need some of that bottled and forced into the Republicans that we have currently representing us, because very few of them have it. And like Trey Gowdy, they can talk a good game. He was absolutely ferocious talk-wise, but he couldn't get anything done. So it's a crazy, stupid, fine combination of things that makes people able to effectively do their jobs. And we have a lot of people in Congress and in the Senate who they're wearing Republican name tags and clothing, and they sit with the Republicans in the proper section. They don't know from, really wrangling and arguing and also dealing, which is what Quinn Hillyer was discussing earlier when he was on the program. So right now, I want to get to some more of this content that I was able to find. And this is super important. First, we're going to listen to this little bit of audio. It's Ann Coulter. She's talking about what President Trump has to do in order to get through to the American people tonight. He has to say some things. He has to do some things. It's number 5.
You can't have any amnesty. You can't amnesty nuclear scientists. No amnesty. That's the most important point. And I think the second important thing he needs to do, and I think he's great at this, by the way, it's not like we're asking Trump to do something outside of his wheelhouse. He can be very presidential. He can have a lot of gravitas, despite what you constantly hear on TV. He doesn't demonstrate it often, but I always tell people to go back and look at his introduction of Brett Kavanaugh as the Supreme Court nominee. He was more presidential than anyone since Reagan in that. It was sort of a different and very impressive Trump. When he wants to, he can. The objective of this speech, and I've thought the objective of this speech from the beginning, right after the election, was that he should say something like, you say a lot of wild things on the campaign trail. I'm speaking to big rallies, but I want to talk to America about a serious problem that is affecting the least among us, the working class, blue-collar workers, people who depend on government services, parents whose kids are addicted to heroin. This is and the illegal aliens themselves being dragged by coyotes and Mexican drug cartels through dangerous pathways in the desert, kids dying, women being raped. We have to turn off the magnet. That is the humanitarian solution.
And she's right. And I just want to, I had to piggyback off something that she just said. She said that she thought he would make this address about the border after he became the president, and he would kind of say, look, on the campaign trail, we all wax a little poetic and we all get a little bombastic, and maybe the vitriol flowed a little bit because we were in the heat of battle over the nomination and then over the actual presidency. But now that I'm the president of every American, we have a reckoning that we need to come to, and that is that I've said true things about what's going on at the border. The government statistics support it, and I'm here to fix that problem. That's why Americans sent me to the White House. And so I agree with her there, but I would go a step further. There is nothing quite as sweet and special and like clear the deck. You've heard people say it before. Sometimes you think, if I could just get with that person and clear the deck, if you're having a contentious situation with someone, if you want to clear the deck, the fastest way to clear it, completely wipe it clean, is to simply apologize. And so it's not I'm sorry if that offended you. It's I'm the president of the United States. I'm the president of every American. And I want to apologize for comments that I made in the heat of battle when I'm going for the presidential nomination that placed certain Americans on edge, that were uneasy, that were insulting, and maybe were taken out of context by the media. It doesn't matter how it hurt people. I don't want that to be the situation on this issue with immigration. We have to deal with the facts. So I'm apologizing because I want to clear the deck and I want to move forward together as a nation. There are some people you can apologize to them till the cows come home. You can offer the roses, the chocolates, the fruit dipped in chocolate, the berries, Sherry's berries. You can do whatever you want and they'll never, ever accept your apology. But for most human beings, when they hear the word I'm sorry and they feel sincerity behind it, the deck is cleared. And at that moment, you never have more opportunity to have them hear you than whatever you say right after you say, I'm sorry. And so I'm not big into let's do a fake apology because that'll clear the deck and then we'll be able to say whatever we want. I'm not advocating for that. I'm talking about President Trump really being concerned that the media twisted his comments. They actually went out and out lied about what he said about the southern border problem and the crime. And some of what he said, while it was true, it was said in a very direct manner, which is often what people are responding to, not the actual information, but the delivery. And so an apology for that and a clearing of the deck where he could say, when I made those statements, here's what I was talking about. Government statistics from this agency and this agency and this agency that show that this many Americans have been killed due to this, that our drunk driving, deaths have gone up by 10% due strictly to illegal immigrants driving drunk. And he could go down the list of all the things that he's concerned about, that millions of Americans are concerned about, that are the reason why he cannot let go of this issue. And then, as was said here in Joel Pollack's article about how so this is why we're not giving up on the wall. This is why government doesn't open back up until we get the wall. This is why I'm so focused on the wall. And then the other thing that I think that has to be something that the president is willing to discuss is that he has to be willing to say, I've made every offer that I possibly could to the Democrats. I offered to basically obliterate my chances of being reelected in 2020 by giving amnesty to all of the DACA recipients, even the 1 million who never applied. 1 million DACA eligible illegal aliens who are so in love with being in America and so, you ain't taking me out of America, that they didn't even bother to apply for DACA. They just let the deadline slide by because they don't care if they're here legally. And he made an offer to legalize them all, not with work permits, but with a straight up, welcome to America, you get to vote, et cetera, et cetera. And the Democrats still didn't take it. That is the one statement that I think a lot of Americans they missed it. That whole negotiation, the CNN and the MSNBC and all the talking heads, they completely glossed over that because they know it's a terrible look for the Democrats who ran on legalizing DACA recipients. The Dreamers this, the Dreamers that. When's the last time you heard a Democrat say something about the Dreamers? You're not going to, because they don't care about the Dreamers, really. They just care about having an issue with which to bludgeon the Republicans and make people on the right look like murderous, xenophobic thugs. And we know that's not who we are. And they know it too. When we get back, we're going to be having more discussion. Stay right there. Stacey on the Right.
When a woman in crisis walks into a preborn center, she's choosing between life and death.
Well, when I found out I was pregnant, I was actually freaking out because I didn't know if I wanted to keep it or get an abortion. And I didn't want to believe the test, so then I ended up going to the pregnancy center.
After seeing her baby on ultrasound, this young mom chose life.
I seen her feet and her hands.
Preborn stands in the gap for women in crisis to show them love and compassion and their beautiful unborn baby. Would you take a stand for life by sponsoring 5 ultrasounds for only $140? All gifts are tax deductible, and you'll receive a picture and story of babies whose lives were spared. To donate, dial 877-616-2396. That's 877-616-2396. Or visit afr.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Yesterday, I talked about how big the federal government has grown. It is an order of magnitude larger than the largest Fortune 500 companies, but there is a second problem that makes this first problem even worse. Many of the people that are supposed to manage this organization have never been confirmed and placed in those positions. The U.S. Senate has confirmed less than half of the positions in 4 federal government cabinets. Those would be the Justice Department, the Department of Transportation, the Department of the Interior, and the Environmental Protection Agency. But that's not all. Barely half of the positions in 4 other government cabinets haven't been confirmed. Those would be the State Department, the Labor Department, the Treasury Department, and Housing and Urban Development. Employees in these departments are placeholders waiting to be replaced by qualified individuals who have yet to be confirmed by the Senate. In some cases, some have left, and there's an empty desk or office waiting to be filled. By the way, I think this story provides a good illustration of media bias. I suspect most of you are hearing about this for the first time. Imagine how much media coverage would be given if after nearly 2 years in the Obama administration, half of the positions in major departments were still not filled. Of course, we also have to add to this list the fact that President Trump lacks a chief of staff, an attorney general, and a secretary of defense. Again, there are placeholders, but no one in the job with full authority. Guests on my radio program have said that the current situation is unacceptable. That is true, but it isn't all that unusual. We have a government that is too big, often poorly managed, and with many positions waiting to be filled. This is no way to run a government. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Oh, so disgusting. It was horrible, Neil. No one should approve of that. And I hope she doesn't talk to her son that way either. But, what can you say? I can't anyway condone that. It's not how we act in West Virginia. It's not how we talk about public leaders. We might disagree with each other, but we try to get through it. We try to find a pathway forward. Where, to act like that, just awful. And to speak like that is even more deplorable. I am so sorry. I want to apologize to all Americans, any sitting congressperson. There's 535 of us there. 100 senators and 435 congresspeople. We should have better manners than that, I assure you.
Wow. So that is pretty outstanding of Democrat Senator Joe Manchin apologizing for Tlaib's horrible, profane attack on the president. And, she's not apologizing, but she's just, she's from that part of town that you don't go to at night. That's what the thing is. And that's what that language indicates to me. And so we don't, what do you do? Well, you have to ignore a person, but she's out there. And for people who want to automatically, President Trump said, yeah, you know what? 2 wrongs don't make a right. Don't start. And then I won't have to go in on you. Because if that's the simplistic methodology that you apply to seeing someone do something wrong, then we can't even talk. So don't bother. I don't need to talk to you about this. Now, in addition to that, do you remember last Friday? You probably did a whole bunch of different things. You even listened to the show. I know I was here. But there was also a jobs report that came out. Well over 300,000 new jobs created in December. So you might be thinking, I didn't hear anything about it. Well, that's because it was such a blowout. It was such an amazing jobs report in the face of, titans on Wall Street trying to tank the stock market in December because they didn't like the president doing a great job. They don't like all that economic prosperity running around because it makes people think, these Republicans might have something up their sleeve. No, they don't want that. So they're like, well, we gotta turn this thing around. The Fed chair comes out and says he's going to be, just sending interest rates up through the roof because the economy's growing too fast, whatever that means. So you got all that going on. Meanwhile, the Trump economy, over 300,000 new jobs in 1 month. Now, first of all, to God be the glory. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for that amazing report. Because Trump didn't do it. He made conditions conducive to that action happening in this country, but there's something else driving that. And so World News Tonight gave 22 seconds of coverage to this blowout jobs report. World News Tonight, the place you go to watch news about the economy, they gave 22 seconds to it. Let's listen because we certainly need to memorialize it here on this show so it can go in the podcast. It's number 3.
There was encouraging news on the economy today, helping the fluctuating stock market. 312,000 new jobs were created in December, the biggest gain in 10 months. Wages were up 3.2%, in fact, from a year ago. And the Federal Reserve Chairman indicating that interest rates may not rise in 2019 as quickly as expected. Stocks soaring on the news, the Dow recovering from yesterday's steep dive, gaining 746 points.
So when the Dow lost 1,000 points, they were like, apocalypse now. The world is ending. There will be no more America. And it's Donald Trump's fault, his rhetoric and his trade war. For his trade war to be this horrifying, to be this awful. Remember they said the sky would fall down and we would all be crushed underneath it. Yet here we still are. And American companies are creating a lot of new jobs. I think it's interesting because something is afoot. But what? What is causing this? It's just like the engine is roaring. The American entrepreneur and business owners, people are just, they're like, come on, we need more people hired here. And I've begun to notice a lot more businesses with a sign out saying, inquire within, hiring, help wanted. That's interesting because people keep saying that the tax cuts were crumbs and they're only going to hurt Americans and that there's no way people are going to, be able to take advantage of this. Yet the other argument is that we need lots more illegal immigrants because they're willing to do the jobs that Americans aren't willing to do, which implies that there are more jobs than there are people willing to take them. You see how that works? When you apply facts to the liberalism, it just does not add up. Either there are no jobs and we're in economic malaise, or there are lots of jobs, so many so that we need illegal immigrants to fill them, which that's a bald-faced lie. Americans can fill those jobs and lawful immigrants can fill those jobs. Illegal immigrants should not be here filling jobs. So that's good news. You got, World News Tonight, 22 scant seconds, but they did at least mention it. So now I want to pivot over to impeachment. Now, Alan Dershowitz, who he says he's still a Democrat. He voted for Hillary. He says he wants tax reform. I don't know what he's talking about. We already had tax reform and it's killing it. But he says, speaking of impeachment, that the Democrats are going to find themselves in the same place the Republicans found themselves in after impeaching Bill Clinton. Very unpopular decision. And he says it's not going to work. The Dems will never remove Trump. It's number 4.
Well, I'm a liberal Democrat. I campaigned hard for Hillary Clinton. I campaigned hard for the Democrats to take over the House. I'm thrilled that the Democrats have taken over the House. Now there's a check and balance on our president. But for the Democrats to fritter their power away on impeaching the president, it's not going to work. They're not going to ever remove him. The Republicans control the Senate. He hasn't satisfied the constitutional criteria for impeachment. What we want the Democrats to do is get us tax reform, health reform, immigration reform, all the policies that the Democrats have run on and won on. But if they spend their energy and time listening to Maxine Waters, who says he not only wants to impeach the president, but the vice president as well, it will be utterly a waste of time. It will backfire the way it backfired when they impeached Clinton. When they impeached Bill Clinton, he wasn't removed, and the Democrats benefited from that.
And so one of the things that we have to, it's not just one thing, it's a bunch of things that we have to be praying for. But let's take it down in order. First of all, we have to pray that the spirit of John McCain is gone for good, and that we would see the Senate stand up to the Democrats. They can impeach all they want, but when they bring those articles of impeachment to the Senate, that it gets stopped right there, which then ensures that anyone whose heart is growing cold against the president, anyone who's really their signature issue was the repeal of Obamacare, they know it's not happening now and they're really ticked off about it and they're not going to vote for Trump again, that those people would be brought back over and that they would be voting for Donald Trump. Because if the Democrats impeach President Trump, he will sail into 2020. That's how it works. Nancy Pelosi knows she has it's a balancing act. Because if she goes straight for impeachment and shows herself to be just someone who doesn't care anything about policy or doing her job, then Americans will be ready to punish the House, the Democrats, the House controlled by the Democrats, by giving it back to the Republicans when 2020 rolls around. So, I mean, it's a game. It's a game. But they're going to be working ever so hard on trying to find a balance where they can get enough of what they want, which is to make President Trump's life a living inferno. They're going to work on doing that while trying to balance themselves out enough to look as if they're doing a little something to tap dance around some kind of work so that they can end up keeping the House in 2020. They want to do that. They also want to win the presidency. They want to make President Trump a one-term president. And anything's possible, right? Anything's possible for them to do. It doesn't mean it will happen. It means anything is possible. So I mentioned also the national emergency to build the wall. So this is important information. Mark Levin actually wrote a Facebook note, and he was writing it to refute a tweet that was sent out by Peter Wehner. Peter Wehner is a never-Trumper, and he says that President Trump cannot declare a national emergency to build a wall. Now, first of all, let's just use our common sense thinking caps for a second. The president absolutely has the right to do it, but why would the Democrats allow Americans to think the president has the right? If they did that, they've lost on the issue. So they have to spread it around to enough media outlets and enough places to get enough Americans to think that it would be an unlawful action to justify them filing suit in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to get an injunction placed on building the wall. Then, once that's done, it has to wind its way up to the Supreme Court. And unless the Trump administration, their lawyers and attorneys can get the Supreme Court to hear the case first and make an emergency ruling, then it means it's tied up waiting on the docket for the Supreme Court for months and months and months, and the Democrats win on the issue. So here's what Mark Levin said about it. He says never-Trumpers get dumber by the minute, and he refers to something called the National Emergencies Act of 1976, which allows the president to trigger emergency powers conferred on him not by Mark Levin or any other person, but by Congress. Again, the National Emergencies Act of 1976 allows the president to trigger emergency powers conferred on him by Congress. It has been in place in various forms for more than 150 years. The president could actually, under this National Emergencies Act, confiscate private businesses. I mean, this is crazy pants. But he's not going to do the confiscation of businesses. It would permit him to build a border barrier of some kind. The reason it would allow it is because defending the border is a uniquely federal government responsibility. It's remanded to the federal government, not the states. He could use the law to undertake such a project. It would be challenged in the courts. It could be overturned by a joint resolution of Congress. And he would need to make, the president would, under the statute, he'd need to make his case. It's an easy case to make, don't you agree? Southern border is a national emergency when it's wide open. There's chaos there, sexual trafficking, human trafficking. There's all kinds of horrible ills going on down there. I believe he could make the case easily to the Supreme Court. He could use the legitimate legal tools available to him to try to solve those problems. But unlike Obama, he would not be legislating by, say, creating like something like DACA, which is absolutely illegal and unconstitutional. And it violates the separation of powers. Yet some nincompoop judge on the liberal side actually validated it. And it's going to come up before the Supreme Court, and I think it's going to get struck down. They've already ruled on DACA and said it's unconstitutional. But anyway, so Congress set up this process. It's not a misuse of constitutional authority. It's about statutory interpretation. And I can tell you, over at Right Scoop, he says if Obama declared a national emergency to build a wall on the southern border, the left would have loved it. Well, he says he would have loved it. And I think the left would have too, because they just followed the wind. Whichever way Obama told them to go, they followed it. They were just fine with it. But it is the purview of the federal government to defend the border. And anyone who says that the president is not the commander-in-chief and doesn't have the legal authority to say these people can't come into the country for 6 months, which he did with what they call the Muslim ban, which was really a moratorium on immigration and refugees from certain countries for a certain amount of time until they could get their vetting procedures up and running. But instead of calling it that, they had to demonize President Trump. And so we've got people running around. Like I recently had someone say to me, like his racist Muslim ban. There was no Muslim ban. There are 49 Muslim nations on this planet, and he only banned 6 nations from sending refugees here for a period of time until they could get their standards up. You guys remember the brouhaha around that? President Trump hates Muslims. He's having a Muslim ban. Then what are all the other Muslims coming in here from other countries? Why didn't he ban them? It's not like we only have 4 or 5 countries where Muslims come here from. They're coming here from every which way but loose. We have the largest concentration of Muslims outside of an actual majority Muslim nation than anywhere else in the world. Same thing with Sudanese people. The only place you can go to find more Sudanese people than America is Sudan. Let that sink into you for a minute. We don't have nearly the landmass to basically be the go-to point for the secondary point of like gathering for every people group on the planet. So if you're not in Japan, the second largest place to go to find Japanese people, America. You know, I mean, if you're not in China, second place you can go to find the most Chinese people, America. What are we doing? Do we want it to remain America? People keep acting like this is a Mexican thing or a south of the border thing. It's a, hey, you're not a natural born American citizen thing for me. And I know it's unpopular to say because people get all in their feelings and they're like, well, if I say that, people will think I'm xenophobic. So I automatically have to not say that and also think that she's some kind of like crazy person for saying it. I'm not a crazy person, and neither are you for thinking it. Go ahead and get your emotions out of it and just think, how long does America remain America if we keep bringing in people faster than we can assimilate them? We have to first turn an immigrant into an American, and we have to do that successfully. So they've bought into the experiment and they want to voluntarily obey our laws and participate in our governmental processes and in our society, and then bring in the next batch. We can't just be piling them in so fast that they create little Sudan here in America. I mean, you know, it was all the rage. It was little Italy and little this and that. Okay, wonderful. Chinatown, fantastic. But do we need that everywhere? Do we want to literally change America from America to little this nation, little that nation, and, you know, no-go zones and places where you don't feel comfortable because it's nothing like America and it's definitely not a tourist spot? I mean, these places that are kind of stood up in Michigan and places like that where the people who practice Islam have piled in and they're in a, you know, mass of people living in neighborhoods and taking over entire areas. It's not friendly. It's not like you can just roll through there with your, you know, your permanently tan self and just, you know, pull up to whatever restaurant and just get your food order on and go on about your business. It's not friendly to outsiders. That's not America. Or at least when it was America, that was back when we had segregation, and we know how much we all hated that. We'll talk about more when we get back. We're going to have our guests as well. Stay right there. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. In 1 Samuel 21, we see David fleeing from King Saul. David uses every trick in the book to preserve his own life, from eating the priest's holy showbread to lying about why he is in the vicinity. At one point, David pretends to be insane, thinking that doing so will prevent angry servants from killing him. Emulating these deceptions are not the point of David's story. Being in fear for his life made him do things he would not normally do. But the story doesn't end there. David wrote Psalm 34 during this difficult time, singing, "I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth." This is a beautiful way of describing the true nature of walking with God. In the low times, when all have forsaken you, continue to bless the Lord. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've been all over the country helping disaster victims who lose everything.
It's truly a blessing. I really don't have the words to express.
And yet they see a glimmer of hope when a volunteer shows up.
Building the home, that's the second reason we're here. The number one reason is to share the gospel and give them hope.
It's everything that's right in America. I mean, it really represents the best that we have to offer.
That's one of the main reasons for doing it, is being able to be the hands and feet of Jesus and coming out and working with so many wonderful volunteers.
I just feel like it's important in this day and age to teach a child how to serve.
Please go to our website, 8daysofhope.com, and click on Get Involved. Submit your email address, and the next time we go anywhere with a disaster, we'll invite you to come along as well.
I love coming in the job room because you can see these pieces of paper. They aren't just a piece of paper. Right. It's a family that's hurting, and it's a gospel opportunity.
You know, I just thank God, for this moment. I mean, I'll be back in my home, and I know it's going to be awesome.
Come love others with 8 Days of Hope.
America's talking to Fox News.
Thousands of federal workers are affected by the partial government shutdown. Some are furloughed. Others, like federal prison guards and air traffic controllers, are working without pay. We wanted to know, how do they feel?
This is the third shutdown in 5 years, and each time we were required to report to work.
We shouldn't be held hostage because Washington can't come to an agreement.
When you leave, when you're in the break room, or when you leave work and you go home, you're thinking about that. We don't want it to be a distraction. We are aviation professionals, and we operate that way, but it's not sustainable.
Border wall, fine. Not a problem. I mean, they do it, they don't. All I want to do is make sure that the people in my family, the people I love, the people I know are taken care of.
We still have to come to work and do our job. We still have to protect the community. We still have to protect the inmates and the staff that are in this institution, and we're not getting paid.
We're your friends and neighbors. We're being told to come to work. We don't know when we're going to be paid. Our professionals remain on the job. They continue to come to work.
America's talking to Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thanks for being here today. It's my pleasure to be with you. I also want to, one more time, just remind you, if you're just tuning in, we are partnering with Preborn this week, and we are excited about having you share in this ministry with us by providing a gift of $28 to give a free ultrasound in the gospel to an abortion-minded mom to save the life of that unborn baby and to guide that young woman into parenthood and the knowledge of Jesus Christ. This is 877-616-2396, the call line for you. 877-616-2396, or go to afr.net and partner with us. We are so excited about our next guest. We have Karen Straughan, spokesperson for Men's Rights Edmonton, a contributor to avoiceformen.com. Karen, thanks for joining in today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's talk about this. You got the women's marches, and those are supposed to be multicultural, diverse, just the epitome of everything that people are pointing to when it comes to, women's
intersectionality,
yeah,
diversity,
yeah,
and inclusivity.
Yes.
There you go.
You know the buzzwords. I'm always at a loss because I don't know.
I read this stuff all day long, and so I know the jargon. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's terrible because it doesn't mean anything. But I'm surprised that the simple fact that more white people have showed up than minority people means you have to cancel it.
Yeah, that was in Eureka, California, where I think the city is 75% white and the county itself is something like 85% white. So you're looking at you're going to have a predominance of whites showing up at something like this. And also, I would say, when it comes to having a weekend day off or whatever, there are probably going to be a higher percentage of minorities who are working jobs like at Walmart or wherever, where they maybe aren't even going to be able to take the day off to do something like that. So essentially, I think just being upset about something like it's too white is ridiculous. I'm more interested in the cancellations over the national leadership's close, friendly, chummy ties with the Nation of Islam and with Louis Farrakhan, particularly given some of his anti-Semitic remarks that were recorded when he was addressing a national audience or an audience of national members. And the fact that it took the Women's March national leadership a month to disavow what he said. That's kind of interesting. I mean, the whole thing just seems to be falling apart. And there's so many different little stories within all of this sort of coming crashing down. There was, I remember her last name, Rubel. I think her first name was Vanessa. She used to be on the leadership of the national chapter, and she was squeezed out because she wouldn't properly confront the Jews' special place in the history of the oppression of black people. She did not do this to the satisfaction of Tamika Mallory and some of the other black members. So, the whole thing, and it is the intersectionality dogma and the inclusivity dogma that's doing it, because the set of theories behind those two very benign words. Everybody knows that you sometimes can be discriminated against because you're black, or you can sometimes be discriminated against because you're a woman, and sometimes it's because you're a black woman. Everybody knows that, right? And that's what intersectionality is, and the diversity and inclusivity thing. There's nothing wrong with a diverse crowd, and there's nothing wrong with being, including everyone, but the set of theories behind those little catchphrases is extremely divisive, and that's sort of the recipe for exactly what's happening now, where you get these little turf wars going on within the leadership, within the chapters. Are we being inclusive enough? You're marginalizing these voices and those voices, and these are the already marginalized voices, so they need to be put up front and given the microphone first, and all of this stuff that it just turns into backbiting and a balkanization of the entire endeavor. So I predicted this. So,
I think it's funny because it shows the hierarchy that the Democrats have. The hierarchy means that some of the animals are more important, they're more equal than others, and then the ones that aren't as equal, they just have to wait for their turn to come out and get a chance for a little bit of equalization. But in any case, everyone has to kowtow to what they've been told the rules are, and if they don't, then they're liable to be branded enemies. And I want to be perfectly clear here. There's some tongue-in-cheek to what I'm saying, because I don't believe that the animals should have to go through this kind of drama. Like, it's ridiculous. We're talking about people here, and if they want to get together and have a march, they should just do it without getting the approval of their overlords. Oh, wait, they're not allowed to do that.
Well, certainly women have enough in common with each other that we should all be able to say, okay, so we there are some things we all agree on. There are some things that we don't, right? Nobody wants women to become enslaved. No woman wants women to become enslaved. No one wants women to be beaten or raped or anything like that. Nobody wants those things to happen, right? Fine, we can agree on all of that, right? But then, you know, if you don't agree that the wage gap is a really real thing, and that it's based on, if you don't believe that it's based on discrimination, if you believe that it's based on other factors like women having the freedom to choose what they want to do with their lives, right? Then you go stand in a corner, and heaven forfend you're pro-life, because you're out the door, right? The second that they find out, because, you know, it's a very, it's not about women. It's about a certain political ideology, and that political ideology seems to have a really neat habit of eating itself. So, which is probably the only reason why we're not all living under it right now.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad that it's not working. But yeah. I feel kind of bad for people who legitimately, so for whatever the cause that you're interested in improving upon, and you're legitimately looking to a group like, say, the Women's March to help you, you know, get the word out or mobilize other women, et cetera, and in the end, you're kind of laying down with, you know, dogs and then getting up with fleas in a state of shock. The reason that their movements don't work is because you mentioned anti-Semitism. A number of the leadership of the Women's March are really heavily involved with individuals who are openly anti-Semitic, like Louis Farrakhan. They're not openly friendly with him by accident. It's not like when you're standing in line at the grocery store and you strike up a conversation with a person in front of you, and then later you find out that person is anti-Semitic. Well, you've only spent 5 minutes with them at the grocery store. You're not in league with them. That is not the relationship between the Women's March leaders and Louis Farrakhan. They love him. Linda Sarsour thinks he's amazing because she hates Israel. She's a BDS movement proponent. She's anti-Semitic. It's not an accident that she's friends with him. That other one either, Tamika, whatever her name is, Mallory, she's not accidentally buddies with Louis Farrakhan. You don't accidentally become buddies with Louis Farrakhan. You know he's an anti-Semite. You are friends with him if you are one too.
Exactly. You know, like it's pretty difficult to interpret. You know, I'm not anti-Semite. I'm anti-termite. You know, because the Jews apparently to him are termites. It's pretty hard to interpret that in a positive way. I mean, I guess he could have been commenting on termites' industriousness and incredible ability to cooperate with each other, but I don't think so. And so essentially, what you're looking at is this there's a lot of picking and choosing going on in this bizarre intersectional hierarchy of victimhood, right? And so the Jews are no longer the biggest victims on the block. The Holocaust was 7 years ago, for crying out loud. You know, it's ancient history. Now they own everything, right? So this is. I'm not saying this. I'm just interpreting what their reasoning is. I'm just trying to guess at what their reasoning is, because I don't feel that way. But essentially, what you have is they're down at the bottom of the progressive stack, and it's the Muslims who are up at the top, and so they can get away with anything, and they are never to be criticized, not even when they need to be criticized. So essentially, you're looking at the Islamic agenda, particularly through Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour, is taking over, and anti-Semitism is just fine. It's just fine in that national leadership because the Jews are no longer the number one victims out there. That's now the Muslims.
It is, and also illegal aliens. However, that mix will work. So. What I had this diagram, and I have no idea what I did with it, but I will have to break it back out if I can locate it, where it showed the hierarchy of, so, you know, if something's racist, but it depends on who says it, if it's racist or not. If a Republican says it, racist. If a Democrat says it, not racist. And you follow it, the diagram on down, and you can see how the same sentence is not racist depending on who says it. And it points to, again, the hierarchy that you're talking about, Karen, where so some of the animals are more equal than others. And it used to be unions, blacks, or minorities, period, not just blacks, but minorities. So unions, minorities, and somewhat of women, but it wasn't really like a woman-focused thing. It was just women need reproductive rights and, you know, that whole thing. Now the Democrats have moved to a new area where Jews were considered a minority. So Jewish people could say, well, the Democrats want to protect my right to, be in this country. They believe that I have the right to be protected from Muslim aggression if I'm in Israel, and they believe that Israel is our ally. Well, they've morphed from there. They're so far away from there that most of the younger Democrats don't recognize that kind of conversation coming from older Jewish people or older people who are Democrats who still believe that. Like, there's a huge schism there.
No. Now the American Jews, at least, are white equivalent. So they don't get any special favors, and they don't get any special consideration. And in fact, they've just been lumped in. It's as if the body of white America reached out a pseudopod and absorbed, like an amoeba, absorbed all of those Jews and pulled them in, and now they are us. Now they are among the body of oppressors, and it's really such a divisive and it's an antagonistic. It's a conflict. It's literally called conflict theory. It's a conflict-driven model. It posits that when you have two classes of people, those classes their fundamental relationship is one of conflict, not one of cooperation, not one of tolerance, not one of tit-for-tat exchange, fair trade, anything like that, or even just ignoring each other. No, they are in conflict, and their interests are in conflict, and one of them is subordinate, and one of them is in the position of oppressor. So that's really how they examine everything. I mean, this is what's taught in women's studies and black studies and most other courses and programs that end with the word studies that have been coined as grievance studies. So when you're looking at that being the only sociological model through which these kids in university are being taught to view society and view the way humans interact in it, of course they're going to come out with this highly combative, highly divisive, we're going to chop everybody up into their representative identities, and then now you're all pitted against each other for your fair share of the pie, some of which should get more than others because they've historically been denied as much pie as those guys over there. So it's absolutely it's a destructive ideology, and hopefully it's self-destructive enough to destruct itself.
I hope so. Thank you so much for joining the show today and for your work at avoiceformen.com. It's avoiceformen.com. Karen Straughan, spokesperson for Men's Rights Edmonton, avoiceformen.com. Thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Happy New Year. I would just say, she makes the excellent points about the victimology and the victimhood and all of that. And it's just not for me, not for Karen, not for any other person, but for yourself. If you find yourself, if you're, working in activism, or you have something that you're working on, a cause, anything, and you begin to understand that certain parts of the movement are of more import than others, that everyone's not equal, that all of the concerns aren't equally brought to the fore, then you're in the wrong movement. If you're sitting there and you're feeling like, well, I'm totally a victim and we need to work on my problem, except when we're working on the problems of the Palestinians because they're far more equal than me, you're in the wrong movement. Get you someone who cares about you the way the Democrats care about power. That's what I got to say. All right. You be blessed this evening. Fantastic night to you. Be back with you tomorrow. Let's pray for the president until his address this evening, and let's watch. I'll be online a little bit while I'm watching. God bless from the Heartland. Good evening, citizens.